So welcome to today's kind of platform leadership discussion. I'm going to lead you a little bit through what we think about in the platform engineering space from a leadership perspective and how you can be a leader in your platform initiative. So my name is Mallory and I am platformengineering.org trainer. I also get called a platform therapist fairly often. You may see me around not just teaching the certification courses online for platform engineering, but in person as well. And that's something we'll talk a little bit about what those look like at the end of the session, but I do want to give you a lot of good information about platform leadership. So hopefully we get to do a QA. Hopefully Zoom being stupid didn't waste too much time, but I'll make sure to try and leave as much room as I can for questions at the end, but just in case, you can reach me at my email, mallory@platformengineering.org. Also on LinkedIn and in the Platform Engineering Slack community, which we will make sure you get a link to. Today's webinar is being recorded and you will also get a copy of the slides afterwards. So yeah, with that being said, let's get started. So I want to talk about 5 key things today to give you a real piece of best practice for leadership inside of the platform engineering space. So the first thing is I want to talk about why these initiatives fail. I see this a lot. This is where the platform therapy comes in. I can tell you a lot of things that can go wrong to help you learn how to avoid hitting those roadblocks. I also want to look at the platform as a product mindset. This is incredibly important. And if you take one thing away from this, please take that from this talk. I can't stress it enough. It's very hard, especially if you're an engineer or from an engineering background, to stay on that mindset. So take the time to really think about it. I want to touch briefly on the minimum viable platform, the MVP, and why you should be doing one, as well as aligning a little bit on vision and a little bit of information about going beyond the fundamentals of building a basic platform. So let's start by looking at why 67% of platform engineering initiatives fail. And where this data comes from is the state of platform engineering, as well as our interactions with the community as a whole. So 67%, that's a majority. That is an awful lot. But why is this actually happening? Well, when I go through this, I like to not just show why these things fail, but tell you what the best practice is to avoid them. And I want to be very pragmatic and blunt about it because I think it's important to know what risks you could come up against and what it might look like, but also how to mitigate them. So the first thing I see the most common where people will start failing is that they move too fast and they rush to being complex with the platform. What you really need to do instead is start very slow, embrace this mindset of continuous improvement. And this is something we do inside of the MVP framework, which I want to touch on today. But what's important to understand here is that you need to do things as low risk and as sustainably as possible, but continue showing value, and you need to do that quickly. So if you start with the MVP, it allows you to have that slow, progressive buildup of momentum while quickly proving value. And I'll show you how to do that. The other big mistake I see is that people end up focusing in only on tools and only on technology. So they get into that mindset of, well, every problem we have can be solved by a tool somewhere. And while there is an element of solution-based tooling to these discussions, it's not really the be-all and end-all. And I caution you on getting stuck here. What you need to do instead is take this platform engineering, platform as a product philosophy, which really is about the fact that when we do this right, it's 10% technology, 90% about culture, people, and process. It is easy if you do come from that engineering background to go into both of these rabbit holes. So the tools and technology side, as well as complexity, tends to be how we think. So that is one of the hardest parts of doing this right. And I encourage you to surround yourself with people who are experienced, going down kind of the less technical rabbit holes of looking at process and people, and really think about how to counter your own bias here. The other thing I see a lot is people build useless platforms. Now, I have had probably 100 conversations in the last 3 or 4 months where a team comes to me and says, hey, we're not getting adoption on our platform. What are we doing wrong? And it is something to do with the fact that they either didn't explore what people actually need for their platform, or they're starting in the wrong place. So you need to combine this idea of the platform as a product, as well as use something like the MVP framework in order to solve actual problems and drive real value. There are some best practices here that we touch on a little bit inside of this class today, but there are other best practices in some of the other webinars as well as the courses. And the last one I want you to really keep in mind about why things fail is because people get stuck in this idea that developer experience initiatives are only about developers. It's actually fundamentally untrue. And if you really pigeonhole yourself into that, you're going to get stuck in an endless loop of technology, tools, and too much complexity early on. What I want you to do instead is work collaboratively across the engineering landscape in your organization as well as beyond, and think about cross-cutting concerns, those things that we need to take into consideration, because if we don't, there's a problem. Security, finance, governance and regulations, all of those different things have to be brought into play too, as well as tying it all into business value. So looking at the MVP framework as well as the platform as a product mindset helps you avoid this common hole. The most important thing I would say to keep in mind throughout a platform engineering initiative, especially if you are a leader in this space, is that you need to lead through proving continuous value. It's not just through strategy and direction, it's through having a clear value prop for both of those things. And what I generally recommend you do is you look at the pain points that you are facing inside of your technical org. So for developers, it's stuff like missing self-service, high cognitive load, they have to wait for stuff, things are slow. And on the infra and ops side, things like ticket ops, low standardization, lack of secure configuration, manual reviews, costs. Take all of these pain points and convert them into value drivers. Now, when you start doing this, there's really two perspectives I want you to think about. And one is that developer experience side. So we call people that come from this background developer experience platform engineers. And what matters to them is automation. That's the key value driver that you want when you start your platform all the way through its maturity. And on the other side, for infrastructure folks, so infrastructure platform engineers is what we like to call them, their bias, the things they love the most are stuff about standardization. You also need to have this. This is really what drives value inside of platform engineering. What's critically important is that you need both. So there's no point in standardizing without putting automation on top to deliver that standard, and there is no point in automating without a standard to actually deliver. So keep that in mind. And know the bias with which you and your team come to platform engineering with. Are you a DevX type person who's going to be more focused on automation? Or are you an infrastructure focused person, operations focused person who's going to be biased towards standardization? You need to have both. It's a little bit of a cultural exercise to make sure you have both aspects of these value drivers, but also that you challenge the bias you and your team have internally towards them. What you also need to do is make sure that you can transform the value drivers you have inside of your platform engineering initiative into clear business impact. This doesn't always mean things like saving money, but it means things like increasing time to market. It means things like reducing incidents, improving mean time to resolution. It means being more competitive in the space your business is in. There's a lot of stuff you can tie platform engineering initiatives to once you understand the value it really offers outside of just the technical space. So keep this in mind too as you go through the process and continue to lead by pushing value across all of the different stakeholder groups that you have to interact with. Now, when it comes to that stakeholder group, who are they? Realistically, as a platform team, your job is to manage the stakeholders and understand what their needs are. So the platform team itself is that group of people that build, run, and improve that internal developer platform. So you could think of them like a startup inside of their parent organization. This is often how I describe it. And generally, what you see inside the purple circle here, so a head of platform engineering, DevX and infra platform engineers, and a platform product manager, as well as a program manager or a project manager, whatever works for you. These roles are really important in managing the stakeholders that are surrounding platform engineering as a whole. They are also the people that drive that platform as product mentality and use that mentality in order to interact with stakeholders and build something that people will actually use that will actually drive value. One thing I will note is very commonly when we start with teams working on their platform engineering initiative, these roles may not be your full-time gig. This might be something you're doing on the side as a passion project internally, something you've been tasked on, but your main day-to-day job may be an engineering manager, maybe a full stack engineer. It may be something different. Either way, you need to make sure you understand who fulfills these roles inside of your platform engineering organization so you can make sure that the work is getting done and the stakeholders are being appropriately interacted with. You'll also see in our stakeholders list, it's a lot more than just developers. We have security teams, architects, infrastructure and operations teams, sometimes also called cloud teams, compliance and legal, as well as our management and executives. These people are all important and they all need to be considered inside of your platform initiative. Make those connections early and keep them. So I talked a lot already about this platform as a product mentality, and I want to give you a bit more information here. This comes from a 2018 article by Evan Botcher, which really describes the platform itself as a foundation of self-service APIs, tools, services, and knowledge that are arranged as an internal product. And it's also important to note that he specifies it's compelling. So, like I said, the platform team is realistically the startup that builds that internal developer platform as a product for their internal market. So the developers and other folks inside of your company. It matters that we think this way because if you understand developers' pain points and build something that functions as an actual compelling product, you can actually get adoption. If you don't understand your customer needs, you're going to end up in a place where no one will use it. When we look at this platform as a product mentality and realize it's a key pillar of platform engineering, there's a couple outcomes that are really critical to understand here and things that you will see as you take on this mindset. So you'll see that you suddenly have an idea of ownership. And what that means is that instead of looking at building the platform like a project that you finish at some point in time, the platform itself has this life cycle. It is a product and it functions inside that product life cycle. So you start small, you scale based on user feedback, and you grow from there. You also need to get a new perspective. So developers that use this platform need to be treated like customers, and that's very important. You have to treat them like the folks that pay the bills. Make sure you understand their needs and you're building something they actually want, not just something you, or frankly, they think they want. And there is a difference there on how you do that. Product management basics are very important as well to do this all right. So that's stuff like user research, user-centric design, road mapping, feedback loops, product marketing, all those critical pieces that you need to have when you market a product, market and sell a product in order to be successful. It applies here too. So I do understand very well, though, that engineers, especially folks from an infrastructure operations or a DevOps background, find this is a really significant mindset shift. I do a lot of coaching of teams going through this. And I would say a lot of it is I have to remind people to get a little bit out of that engineering mindset and more into that platform as a product way of thinking. It's often just reminding people of things like think a bit higher level, don't get too deep in the weeds. Really think about how you're going to drive value here, how you would market and sell this thing. There's a lot of different potential tripping hazards along the path of building a platform if you don't adopt this mentality early on and keep yourself honest. The main challenges you will come up with once you start thinking of the platform like a product are things like a shortage of product management talent. And honestly, this is really hard. Not everyone is skilled in this area. Not every team has someone that can be that product owner, that product manager. But what's important is you find someone that can at least give it a shot. It's critical that you have this person, that they understand the problems you're trying to solve and how you can build a product to solve them. Politics is the other thing that comes pretty hard and fast when you start platform engineering initiatives. And when you start trying to build a product roadmap for the platform, this is probably the most unavoidable thing here, but just be aware of it and keep an eye on it and understand how you can influence it internally in order to get adoption. Change is scary is the other thing that comes up a lot. People are afraid of change. You just have to make sure, though, that when it comes to getting people inspired to make that shift, that there is a very clear why for them, that there is an answer to the question, why should I care and why should I do this? The wrong metrics are another thing I see a lot. And this comes down to really understanding what you are trying to achieve and the value you are trying to drive. If it's about developer efficiency, there are certain things that you want to measure for that versus don't. And there is a context to approach measuring that has a lot less red flags associated with it to developers, but also actually gives you value at the end of the day. And with that comes this idea of listening too closely. So the quote below kind of exemplifies this a bit, but the idea is that Henry Ford said, if I'd asked customers what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. So he built the Model T. the first cars, essentially. And if he'd asked people what they wanted, they would have just wanted a faster horse, not a car. Innovation sometimes requires listening to what people say and understanding the problem and designing a solution for that problem rather than just listening to what someone else thinks the solution might be. So it's exactly the same here. A developer may say, well, I just need access to a repository of Terraform templates, but is that really the solution that's going to give the highest value? Chances are it's probably not, especially if you go through how we tend to recommend you build a platform. So let's talk a little bit about how you do build that platform. And we'll start with this concept of the minimum viable platform, the MVP. And what it is realistically a foundational version of your platform that is designed to very quickly show value and support scalability without requiring incredibly intensive initial development. So we commonly use these in platform engineering to build very simple but functional versions of internal developer platforms that meets basic needs, but proves value to stakeholders before you get commitment to a full-scale platform rollout. So this is a core concept of modern product management, the idea of a minimum viable product, in our case, minimum viable platform, and it lays the foundation for this platform as a product approach. It's going to give you a way to start and a way to scale. When it comes to what an MVP looks like from a technical perspective, it's incredibly minimalistic. And what I've done here is grayed out a lot of the areas that you don't need to be thinking too much about at the MVP stage. And before you come at me and say, Mallory, you grayed out security, but I thought these things are supposed to be secure by design. They are. But when it comes to minimum viable platform, often the scope is very much just a proof of concept or a sandbox, or you're working with, you're working with non-production resources. You're really, really trying to prove a point. So we maybe try to keep things like observability and security as minimal as possible in terms of stuff like crazy role inheritance and secrets management, for instance. Just keep it as foundational as possible to your bare minimum needs in order to just prove the point of structuring an internal developer platform that actually works. So that is what I caution you about as well. And, scope creep is something that happens here. And you can be very pragmatic about how you avoid it. There are some very good MVP talks out on the internets that you can check out. And frankly, I tend to talk about this all the time. So you'll see it all over the place. And there's no shortage of information about the scope and how you go about this. The other thing about the MVP that's really important is its whole job is to try and be part of this cycle of making platform engineering very predictable. So we start here and we time box it. We time box it to 8 weeks because it means you need to move quickly and you need to be able to prove value fast inside of that time. At the end of the MVP, I want you to be able to have a demoable first version of the platform running. And keeping in mind that time constraint of 8 weeks, that will make sure you are staying honest, the principles of what the MVP really is about. And I promise you it's possible. I do it all the time. After this comes production readiness, where we evolve the MVP into an actual production-ready, production-grade platform for the first team or first applications. And we also time box this to 8 weeks for the same reason. Keep yourself honest and moving quickly and showing value fast. Large-scale adoption only comes after you've really understood these two things and you know how to take your product and scale it, and take your onboarding loop and scale it as well. So make sure you really take the time to go through these things before you just start throwing people at your platform, because otherwise I guarantee you will fall flat on your face. So someone asked a very valid question, which is MVPs need to be done quickly, but don't rush. Yes, don't rush to full adoption of a platform. Absolutely do not. That is my piece of advice, and that's how I will clarify that question. The MVP, though, needs to be done quickly. It needs to be quality, but it needs to be fast. And when you think of it that way, that means the scope has to be very constrained. And that's why it ends up being so simple. The point isn't necessarily the technical complexity of the MVP. It's actually the outcome you can achieve by automating and standardizing. So when we look at the overall goals of the MVP, hopefully, Barry, that answered your question. Feel free to ask more clarifications, or actually, sorry, that was Matthew. If you need more clarification, let me know. But I think it comes back to these overall goals. So this is the idea of showing value within weeks and not years. You're going to get to a point in platform engineering where you might get stuck chasing perfection. And that is also a very good way to fail. So get there quickly, show value, and realize that when you're going to approach it that way, the scale has to be fairly subdued. You also want to make sure you're generating stakeholder buy-in. So get people to be able to answer the question, what's in this for me? And you want to be able to ensure long-term funding at the end of this. Even if you have long-term funding already for your platform engineering initiative, you need to start here. And the reason why is it's going to set the stage for long-term adoption. You're building the foundational layers that you're going to continue iterating on, not just from a technical perspective, but from a product and onboarding perspective that you will use continuously throughout your platform engineering journey. And for that, you're setting the stage for adoption. Just do it right. When I talk about the scope of MVPs, there are 4 rules that I want you to follow. And the first is that you need to have something fairly representative. So it needs to represent basic components that are common across a lot of the technical estate or the whole estate, depending on what your plans are. So use common database types, basic CI/CD that everybody is using or that you want everyone to use in the idea of trying to migrate to something better. Make sure the application structure you are either using as a sample or replicating inside of the MVP is something that people can see themselves in. So if you are a Java shop, do not use a Rust app as an example. It just doesn't make sense in the context of what people are doing and what they can see themselves in day to day. Basic networking is also really important. A lot of the things that come up that make the developer experience so poor are related to stuff like networking. I need to expose my application to the internet. I need to change something with a port. There's a lot of stuff that takes a lot of time that if you are looking at the fundamental basics of how you can automate and standardize that, you can have big wins. So repeatable is the next rule you need to keep in mind. And what this is, the basic skeleton created inside of your MVP needs to be something you can repeat and build on. And like I said, the process as well as the technology you start here is going to give you a quick start for the future. It's going to give you a foundational layer. And from that, you also need to think iteratively. So realistically, you are starting small, and that's okay because your eyes are towards the future the entire time. You have to be committed in order to scale. And if we start small and think of the future on the horizon, it's much easier to do that. Innovative is the 4th rule here. And this one, it's a little bit more psychological, but realistically, the teams that you have on your MVP, so whether or not you have an application developer team testing it for the first time, or even you as the people working on it, you need to be able to inspire people that are touching that first version of the platform to move forward and to do something different and to talk about that with other people. You want the MVP to provide inspiration for contributors to learn new things, engage with new technology, and engage with new ideas, new mindset shifts. And just think about inspiring people, not undermining them. So when you build a platform, you aren't there to take away control for the sake of it. You are there to help them do their work to the best of their ability and to be able to innovate and do cool things as well. So one thing I want to quickly touch on is this idea of staying collaborative and aligning on vision. And what I mean here is that you need to consider the fact that technical complexity and estate sprawl always is something that's going to come into play. And some organizations are going to require a higher level of stakeholder management for entire organization adoption. So as a leader, you need to make sure that you are taking the idea of scale and adoption, plan it very well, manage it very well, and keep it collaborative from the MVP all the way to 100% of your estate onboarded. When it comes to things like outlier use cases, these actually may be very critical components of your platform, and I encourage you to think about them and when they should be considered coming on sooner or later. So if you have, let's say, some internal service that's critically important to every other application in the space, even if traditionally it doesn't seem like one of the first ones that should be onboarded to a platform, that one might actually be a good choice. And as a leader, your job is to make sure you understand the estate as a whole and how you can impact it with the platform. This is part of that. So some of the counters to those challenges that I just mentioned too are things around planning technical and organizational complexity with phased project plans and roadmaps that are really focused in on what you're doing at the time, and keep your high-level stakeholders engaged about value and return on their investment very early on. And that's not just the investment in money, it's also in time and resources. So that's important too. You need to have a very strong and aligned project and product management collaboration between your platform team and your application developer teams, as well as potentially your cloud or infra and operations teams as well. Without that, this will fail. If these people aren't aligned on making sure that the applications are onboarded, that the platform is doing what it needs to do and meeting the needs of the people that use it, this will fail and adoption will not happen. Building migration strategies early on, considering those outlying use cases I mentioned, is really important. And as a leader, it's one of the strongest things you can do to prove that this has legs and your platform engineering initiative isn't just something that's going to start and finish in 6 months with no real success. And the other thing I want you to think about is that you need to flag the minefield early. Identify the things that could be risky or red flags before they happen and have a clear idea. If you encounter one of those red flags, what are you going to do and what are the warning signs? Get ahead of it. Be proactive. This is something you can do when you start small. So I've given you a lot of information, and I think it's a lot to take in, but there is a lot of opportunities as well to learn more about this stuff. So if you want to go beyond the fundamentals, how do you learn more? Well, one thing I will say is that I will recommend that your organization probably needs more consistency, and this is something that's far beyond the basics of just reading about platform engineering. It's not enough that you as a platform leader understand this space and what's going on, but you need to ask yourself, does your team, do your colleagues, does your boss, does upper management, the people that make decisions, do they understand this idea of platform engineering in the same way you do? And are you all aligned around the same concepts and ideas? The thing is you have to have this in at least some form or fashion in order to get anywhere. You all need to be on the same page. So there is standardized and industry-leading training to get everyone there that I think is very important. And it's what I want to touch on a little bit before I get to Q&A. So you're going to get resources, skills, and knowledge from the business side of platform engineering, which, by the way, most people need a lot of work on because a lot of us come from engineering backgrounds. That's the stuff like internal selling, getting stakeholder buy-in, building and keeping momentum, and knowing how to tie that into the technical aspect. It's a big part of what the training looks at. So when it comes to learning more and getting certified, there are some options. So there's the individual platform engineering certifications now out, which I am teaching, as well as the organization platform engineering certification. I teach those too. And you have options. So the online version kind of runs, we're running one each quarter at the moment. They're lovely big groups, lots of folks join in. And in terms of the in-person ones, those are where I will often go and work in person with a team for a couple of days or even a week and lead them through the training. And we do a lot more contextual hands-on work, lots of workshopping, super fun experience. I've been loving doing these. And I know that the other trainers are too. What your needs are, mileage may vary, so please get in touch with the platformengineering.org team to find out which option is best for you and your team to get aligned on. Make sure you all end up on the same page and heading in the same direction and following the best practices that we have, not just from an individual perspective, but from an organization as a whole. There's knowledge, there's a lot of knowledge that you can have here, and knowledge is power. So with that being said, I will open it up to questions.
Great. I see we have already a question from Nick. It says, how many people should be involved in the platform development or operations if we are talking about an enterprise scale of 400 more applications?
It depends. So some of the enterprise level teams I walk into are like 6 people, and then there's ones that are like 60 or 600. I mean, it varies very much based on where the initiative is at, so the maturity of the platform engineering initiative as a whole. One of the things we do look at a lot in the course is evaluating where you're at there. The other thing really does depend on what do you already have in terms of platform engineering team structure and skill sets. So there's that too. But generally, it's proportionate to the maturity of the initiative as a whole. So early on, those teams tend to be quite small, maybe focused on helping a subset of an organization with a platform, and then over time they scale. But it does truly depend on honestly what's going on. I'm not kidding though. I have seen literally 6 with developer teams of like 1,200 plus. It's possible. It's hard work, but they do get it done. There are other orgs too that have sub-platform teams within different business units that all kind of work into one central platform. Lots of different options. There's no one right or wrong way. It depends on what your needs are. And I'm happy to chat with folks separately on what that means for them and kind of what my recommendations are. And that's something we can do as well.
Thank you. Do you see fundamental differences with platforms for embedded devices for which we have less flexibility than for cloud kind of SW?
Yeah, so there's a lot of in a lot of the platform engineering space, we talk about cloud native because obviously that's kind of the big thing in terms of runtime deployment environments at the moment. But those principles can be applied when you also have to talk to any kind of hardware system, any sort of on-prem piece as well. One of the teams I work really closely with actually manages quite a bit of hardware as well for Cimpress, Vistaprint, if you know who those folks are. And they use platform engineering principles as well as their internal developer platform to power those on-prem hardware systems as well as sort of their on-prem deployment stack too. And believe it or not, I have heard of older mainframe legacy stuff being brought into platforms too. Obviously, it's a bit different what is supported versus what isn't, but having some layer of those included as well is entirely possible and not unheard of. I just encourage you to think a bit about the future. Is it worth supporting something that might be sunset in the next 5 to 10 years, unless you're a bank, in which case mainframes will probably be around until the world ends. It's a good question though.
Okay, do we have any more questions, guys? Let's give it a minute.
No problem. And just to let you guys know, one of the things we are getting asked about a lot is if I can assess where folks are at and make recommendations. That is something we are hoping to make available. So if you're interested in it, just email me and let me know. Because I'm going to try and see, what sort of availability I would have for that kind of stuff and going from there. Are there any other questions? It looks like there is. Carla, do you want to read them for me? Since
Yes.
it's 2:00 and my reading ability is minimized.
Sure. Okay, so yeah, maybe we can start with how people can get more involved with platform engineering. As an advocate.
Yep. Absolutely. So platformengineering.org is the place to go. So we have an ambassador program that's quite fun. Lots of cool folks in that. You can also submit a talk to PlatformCon. I think RFPs are still open if you've done something very cool with platform engineering. And yeah, get involved in the Slack community. There should be a link on the platformengineering.org page, and I think we can post one in the chat too. But lots of opportunity to get involved.
Yes. We have another question. How much should of flexibility versus standardization a typical platform should have?
Going to depend on the circumstance. So, it depends on the organization as a whole. How constrained do things have to be? Are you highly regulated? What does that look like? But there's still a high degree of automation and standardization you can put in place in those organizations. I mean, I've seen fully automated deployment pipelines all the way through to production in healthcare, in banking, trading, all sorts of stuff. So it's possible, and it just depends on the comfort of the team with change, and also the ability of the team to make those changes at a reasonable rate, and get things connected and working.
Thank you. Brian is asking, what are some tools that will let me use Jenkins as a platform instead of making an entire new one? We have about 30 devs, so making a new one by one engineer is not possible.
Actually, it's possible. Fun story. It's just you have to think about it a different way. And the way you have to think about it is what you are trying to do is solve a problem, not use a tool. So think about the problem you want to solve. Think about why you want to solve that problem and what you're aiming for, and then look at what's available for you. If Jenkins is the tool that allows you to solve that problem in a way that makes sense for you right now, then go ahead and do it. There's nothing wrong with doing that. The idea behind a platform is that we are trying to make things easier. We are trying to make things more self-service, more standardized, more automated, so that developers can do what they do best, which is actually building code or applications and writing code, and infra and ops teams can kind of not have to take everything they throw over the fence, and vice versa. So just try to think about the problem you're trying to solve, why you're trying to solve it, and that will guide you to what the solution has to be.
Perfect. Answering just to Richard's question, yes, we'll be sharing this presentation and recording tomorrow, so no worries about that. The next question is, what's your opinion on allowing platform clients to make changes in their part of platform code?
I think there's some value in that. Almost like community sourced platforms. We do see this happen quite a bit, and it helps with adoption, honestly, because what you end up with is people feel able to have contributed, people feel connected to what they're working in day to day, and they feel a part of the process. Now, how you do the checks and balances on that, code review of platform changes, is it aligned with the roadmap, et cetera, et cetera. It's like an internal open source project, however you would treat that. Definitely a viable thing. I mean, it's not always the best option in really complex spaces, but it's certainly something we do see.
Great. And which cloud platform do you recommend?
Whichever one gives you the best deal. They're all the same, really, and that would just get the best deal out of one. My number one recommendation.
Then the next question is, how do we deal with inexperienced teams? Full automation?
So what are they inexperienced in is my first question. And what are the problems with that inexperience that are coming up? So is it that maybe they're an inexperienced developer team and they aren't experienced with writing unit tests and having, a way of actually forcing them through that? Maybe that's what you have to do. If it's inexperienced with things like Terraform or other types of infrastructure, find a way to make that self-service or as automated and standardized as possible. Lots of options there. Realistically, you need to look at, okay, why are they less experienced? What is it they're less experienced in? How can we enable them to either bypass that fact and not need to get that experience, or transition them into naturally thinking or learning that way? So remembering, a lot of this is about change management and culture, and it's really about asking why. So do that a lot.
Great. And then I see it says, we, Atos, are offering IDP as a service where the artifacts remain IP of the customer. We can deliver large scalable teams. Who can build this for your organization? What is your opinion on large system integrators offering this as a service?
I think it's cool. I think it's a viable option. And again, it just comes down to what people's needs are. If that's the need they need fulfilled, absolutely valid and a viable option. There's no right or wrong way to build a platform. There's no right or wrong way to integrate your system. It's about delivering a platform that leads to value and outcomes that are positive. And that is what you need to be doing. Have a clear why. How you get there, lots of options, and there's incredibly viable ones like that.
Okay, can you give some tips and perhaps recommend some lightweight tools to create, maintain, and communicate your product roadmap?
A Google Doc, a spreadsheet, a Notion page, Confluence, a Jira ticket, I don't know, rock carvings, psychic tele message, I tons of different things. There's this is part of that mindset of getting stuck inside of tooling and technology. It's not so much about the tools, it's about, can we just get this shit done and do it in a way that gives us what we need? So honestly, the simplest thing could just be a Google Sheet or a Google Doc somewhere.
Thank you, Mallory. Do we have more questions, guys? Okay, we have one. How to find a balance between implementing all the features requested by the clients and keep the product consistent and solid.
Learn from product management principles here. Not every feature a customer requests makes it into a product. You have to learn how to groom the backlog of customer feature requests and make calls about what's going to be the most valuable to put into the platform. And honestly, this is one of the hardest parts of product management too. So I've done enough of that in my life to know how hard it is, and also been a customer success person. So like, hey, how do I advocate for my customer? They really need this thing. It's going to make them really happy, but maybe it's not on the general roadmap because it's only for these folks. You have to learn how to balance this stuff. And this is why having someone with product management and product ownership experience on board is so, so important. Yeah. And how do you learn more about product management? Yeah, I would say there's probably 3 bajillion Udemy courses about it out there. I know there's lots of YouTube videos. We talk quite a lot about the platform as a product approach in the courses and really contextualize it to just this space and how you think about it. But there's all sorts of general things as well out there to give you a bit of a foundation. But yeah, what's so important is just being able to look at your feature request backlog from users and say, okay, what's maybe a lot of things meld into one. Maybe, there's stuff that can come later once you have other features in place. That's just the kind of the skill set of product management that's challenging.
Great. Yeah, I don't know if we have more questions. Let me check the Q&A. No. What problems have you found with clients and customers that had, and how did you solve them?
I could be here for days going through a lot of them, but literally, the start of that slide deck talking about the common pitfalls are exactly what I see. One of the big ones I'll tell you right now is that I see too many people starting with a portal and forgetting that they have to build a backend underneath to support it. Don't go down that road. I actually am pretty sure there's a webinar on platformengineering.org where I complain about portals for a solid 45 minutes and why you don't want to start there. So maybe check that one out too. But that's a huge mistake. And the huge mistake is just trying to chase perfection as well. Don't do that. My biggest piece of advice is to start asking why things are the way they are, why people are looking at platform engineering to begin with, why the status quo is what it is, and go from there. The problems I solve from customers come across every single time I deliver a class or a talk because that real life experience informs so much of the practice.
Great. Okay, guys, do we have any more questions? We are running out of time. Okay, I see one. How to avoid getting stuck in MVP?
Have very clear deliverables and try to achieve them. Maybe take a look at one of the MVP webinars, and it's probably worth looking at the course too, because we talk a lot about making sure you can go beyond MVP, and so much of it comes back into that internal marketing, that internal value creation, having very clear return on investment, having very, very clear value proposition. It's unfortunately not about the technology. It's about being a salesperson. So you do have to look at quite a bit of that in to avoid getting stuck.
Okay. Yeah, I think we just responded to this last question a few minutes ago. Do we have any more questions, guys? Okay, well, I think that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Remember, I'll be sending you the slides tomorrow and the recording, so no worries about that. Thank you, Mallory.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, everybody. And we will hopefully talk to you guys soon.